very senior scholars of the state. I think you need to make some significant contribution to enriching intellectual life of the state. And in this background, I thought of speaking to you today on Kabir. I'll give you the reasons why I speak and outline the formulation before you. Just 1 second, let me. Yeah, I hope you are able to see me. And why do I speak to you on Kabir, the great poet saint of medieval India? And why do I think that Kabir could be considered as a guru of post-colonial India? I don't want to dispute the fact that there could be other gurus, but I think I have read Kabir through and through in Hindi, but I personally think, and there are some other people like me who think that Kabir could be a guru for post-colonial India. My presentation to you today has 3 parts plus 1. In the first, I'm going to give you a broad introduction about Kabir. And in the second, I'm going to discuss 3 readings of Kabir that have been very influential in modern India. And in the third part, I'm going to give you a series of reasons why I think Kabir could be a guru of modern India. And I will read to you at the end, that is therefore plus 1, at the end, 2 short poems of Kabir from Tagore's rendering of the translation in English. I could have done that in Hindi, but this Tagore translation is very interesting. And since I was talking to you in English, I thought I will do this in English. My first part, a broad introduction to you of Kabir. There is still a great deal of dispute with regard to Kabir's age. I tend to suggest here that Kabir was born around 1440, and he died in near Gorakhpur in a place called Magar in 1518. That makes him 78 years old when he died. There are other accounts which either give, all of them admit that Kabir lived a long life, but give him much greater age. Now, if Kabir lived in the 15th and early 16th century, then there is something very interesting that we can actually think of, that Kabir somewhere is on the threshold of what we consider as the modern period. Because during this period, Renaissance was breaking out in Europe in a very big way, and new ideas were coming up, and old structures and power relations were challenged in a very big way. Interestingly, Kabir is outside this particular development in Europe. But interestingly, in India, Kabir becomes one of the great spokesperson of challenging the old regime and demanding that something new be set up. This is one reason why I am speaking to you today. And connected to this is the argument that today most of the historians would agree, and I personally subscribe to that position, that colonialism, as I pointed out in my previous lecture, affected not merely the economy of India, but touched on every aspect of social, cultural, and religious life in India, and tried to turn it in very different directions. Now, interestingly, Kabir is untouched in many ways by this particular kind of colonial or colonial modernity. And if we want to think about the future of India, Kabir could be a stepping stone. This is an important reason that I want to give you why I think Kabir is very important to us. Let me give you a second reason, a slightly complicated reason. G.A. Grierson, I don't know whether you have heard this name, a great British ethnologist and linguist, says that if you dig the mass culture of northern India, you immediately come across sayings and utterances of two poets and religious men. Can you suggest to me who would these two be? Can you think about it? Grierson says, and I have traveled across and spent many years in northern India, particularly Uttar Pradesh. Grierson says it is Kabir and Tulsidas. Tulsidas, the great author of Ramcharitmanas. He says the mass culture in the Hindi belt is suffused with the sayings, utterances, and pieties related to Kabir and Tulsidas. If you read Mirabai and some versions of Raidas, you would find that Kabir becomes quite central in their evocations and in their poetry. Today we have textual literature and particularly readings of Guru Granth Sahib. And Guru Granth Sahib contains numerous sayings of the Bijak, the great writing of Kabir, in a verbatim manner or in a modified way. Kabir himself was put together Kabir's writings were put together into a modern text like the Bijak in the 1860s. and led to a great deal of interest in it. Therefore, this is my second reason, that the mass culture in India is deeply suffused, as I mentioned earlier, with Kabir. So Kabir is on the threshold of the modern, and immediately prior to colonial interventions in India. And the second reason is, if we are going to see the future of India and begin to think that mass culture is important to refound democracy in India, then I think Kabir becomes very important. And Kabir is present in some of the most revered uh, poems and religious texts in India, like the work of Raidas or the work of Mirabai and others. The Oriental literature itself was just fascinated by Kabir. And I have read some of that literature very closely, because they found suddenly Kabir, just prior to the coming of the British. Remember, the British came to India just, or the colonial intervention was made in India uh, almost in the later stage of Kabir's life. They found Kabir a strong monotheist. There was a critique of priesthood and ritualism in him. He called for Hindu-Muslim brotherhood, and he argued that salvation or moksha is open to all who shun evil and surrender to God. And I have read two important Oriental books in this regard, and I don't fully agree with them, but it is interesting how Oriental literature began to construct Kabir. The work of Westcott, Kabir and Kabir Pant, published in 1907, and F.E. Keay, The Religious Life of India, Kabir and His Followers, published in 1931. There is a third reason I want to give to you, and I don't know whether you are familiar with this reasoning. There is a dispute about Kabir's Guru Parampara. There is a large body of literature which traces Kabir's Guru Parampara to Ramanand. I hope you have heard about Ramanand Swami. Because if you travel in North India, you will find that most of the mathas there are Ramanandi mathas. In fact, we talk about the Lingayat maths in Karnataka. In Karnataka, there are more than 3,000 Lingayat mathas, the main mathas and Shaka mathas. But if you look at the entire India, it is not Shankara mathas which dominate, but Ramanandi mathas which dominate. Their Guru Parampara is Ramanand. But Ramanand himself, or Ramanandis themselves, trace their Guru Parampara to Ramanuja. I hope you have heard about Ramanuja, because Ramanuja spent a lot of time in Karnataka, and he is the founder of a distinct philosophical thinking in India called Vishishtadvaita. And this tradition of linkage between Ramanandis and Ramanuja sect continued till the early part of the 20th century, when in one of the great meetings in Ujjain in 1927, Ramanandis decided to cut off their Guru Parampara linkage with the Ramanuja tradition, and declared their independence. Today, the Ramanandi sect is a self-governing sect and does not have much linkages with Ramanuja. I'll talk to you about this slightly about this linkage between Kabir's Guru Parampara with Ramanand a little later. There are other people who think that while Kabir came in touch with Ramanand and considered Ramanand greatly, and you can see this in Kabir's poems. There are others who consider that Kabir was a Sufi and was a disciple of a well-known Sufi saint called Sheikh Taki. But this disagreement has continued. But I will tell you at the end that between this disagreement itself, there is something very interesting. And this disagreement, whether his Guru Parampara runs to Ramanand or his Guru Parampara runs to the Sufi saint Sheikh Taki, cannot be resolved, and I will probably give you some reasons why it is so. Let me elaborate a little about since it is a celebrated relationship between Kabir and Ramanand, let me say a little about this, and you can see this in Kabir, this linkage between Swami Ramanand and Kabir. Ramanand is a very interesting saint. Although he embraced the Vishishtadvaita philosophical tradition of Ramanuja, he argued that this tradition, which was, remember, entirely in Sanskrit language, needs to be passed on to the common persons. And Ramanand, therefore, embraced Hindi because it is through this language that you would connect yourself to people. Now, this is an important development because it is Ramanand who immediately connects India's great spiritual traditions with the common people, and that also in Hindi. And Ramanand, although carried on the Matha tradition that came to him, was an itinerant sadhu. It is itinerant. He believed that you need to go and mix up with people, talk to them in their language, and therefore this kind of roaming sadhus, wandering sadhus tradition, which was not very common, was something very distinctive to Ramanand. And there is one tradition which says that Ramanand was Kabir, even when he was a small boy, was fascinated by Ramanand's bhakti and approach to his devotees, and he thought that Ramanand may not accept him as his shishya, as his disciple, because his name was Kabir. Therefore, he devised a particular trick. Swami Ramanand used, I don't know whether you know, I'm talking about Benares, whether any one of you have been to Benares. If you go to the Vishwanath temple, there are the guards, or all around the Ganga. Uh, there are the guards, and a lot of people go and have their morning bath in the Ganga. And the great Vishwanath temple itself is built on the banks of the Ganga river in Benares. And Kabir is in Benares. He was born and brought up in Benares. So he knew that Ramanand goes and has his bath early in the morning. So he went and slept on the steps of the Ghat, on the walking path of Ramanand. And it was not even daybreak. So when he was walking down, he stepped on Kabir, and suddenly Ramanand screamed, "Ram, Ram!" and Kabir thought that this Ram, Ram is going to be his mantra that Ramanand has given to him. And you will find that Ram Ram recited by Kabir in large number of his poems. So while you have this very powerful tradition as part of Kabir's legacy, there are also others who relate him to the Sufi tradition. And I don't want to tell you much about the Sufi tradition because I have to push my argument across. But I want to tell you one small incident, which incidentally Tagore also mentions in his 100 poems of Kabir. When Kabir died, and he died, as I mentioned to you earlier, in Magar near Gorakhpur, there was a controversy between Muslims and Hindus, because by that time Kabir was extremely well known as a poet and a saint. And Muslims wanted to bury him, and Hindus wanted to burn him. And then they started pulling the rug towards one another. And when they were just pulling the rug that was put over his body, they suddenly found that instead of the corpse there, a lot of flowers. And then how Kabir resolved that, even in his death, the Hindus took half of the flowers and gave them cremation, and Muslims took half of the flowers and buried those flowers at Magar. So this is how true it is historically. One doesn't know, but it actually this kind of a dantakate, this kind of a folk tale, tells you a lot about Kabir, that how it was so difficult to divide Kabir between Hindus and Muslims, or between the Bhakti tradition among Hindus and the Sufi tradition among Muslims. Okay, this is my background, and you can ask me questions. Not that I'm a great scholar of Kabir. I keep reading Kabir once in a while. Let me come to the second part of my presentation. Now, scholarship on Kabir in post-colonial India has been deeply sensitive to the changing ideological registers. There are people who have upheld Kabir as a liberal egalitarian, and they celebrate his humanistic objectives. I don't know whether any one of you have seen this. This is also made into a movie, Hindi movie. A classic work in this regard is Bhisma Sahani's work, Kabira Khada Bazaar Mein, published in 2010. This is a theater play, and Bhisma Sahani, one of the greatest Hindi playwriters, celebrates Kabir in this play as a liberal egalitarian thinker with deep set humanism. There have been attempts to project Kabir as a Sufi and the advocate of Hindu-Muslim unity. For instance, a book by Muhammad Hidayatullah called Kabir, the Apostle of Hindu-Muslim unity. Recently, Purushottam Agarwal, who was a UPSC member and my own colleague in Jawaharlal Nehru University, has argued that Kabir was the harbinger of an indigenous modernity contrasted with colonial modernity. And as I mentioned to you earlier, his book, Akhat Khani Prem Ki, celebrates the dimension of love and the significance of love in Kabir's writings. Further, in recent years, Dalit writings in Hindi have contested the prevalent mode of reading Kabir. And the distinction that was made, which has remained for a very long time, was made by Ramchandra Shukla between Sagun and Nirgun Bhaktis, and Ramchandra Shukla places Kabir within the Nirgun Bhakti tradition. Now, Dalit writings have contested it. Dalit writings have argued, and this is a little subtle argument, they say that Sagun and Nirgun are both dominant upper caste modes of looking at bhakti. Kabir cannot be put into that framework because Kabir was somebody who is a rebel, who is contesting dominance, and therefore Kabir has to be read outside the religious traditions as somebody who is reasserting the significance of the world. And I will come to that later, touch upon this a little later. So for them, for these new Dalit writings in the Hindi world, particularly the work of Dharamveer and Dharamveer's book Kabir and Ramanand Kiunvadatiya, he argues that Kabir must be made, Kabir's writings must be made a site for rebellion, Kabir's writings. And Kabir, Dharmaveer argues, must be located in a direct line of descent to Buddhist beliefs and practices. And he argues that the Nirgun Bhakti that Kabir evolved is a very different way of looking at the world. And this Nirgun Bhakti is embodied in Dalit communities across India. And then he further argues, Dharamveer, that there are quite a few disputed poems of Kabir. And how do you settle that dispute? And Dharamveer argues that one of the way of resolving this dispute is whether those poems which are disputed are compatible with Dalit outlook or not. So you can see that in the contemporary Hindi world, Kabir is very much present, but also is deeply contested. Now, quickly about the three authors that I wanted to highlight. The first one, Rabindranath Tagore's 100 Poems of Kabir. He translated Kabir from Siti Mohan Sen's Hindi translation, 100 Poems of Kabir. I'll read two of those poems to you a little later. Now, in this work, Tagore does a particular kind of picking and choosing and interpreting Kabir. For Tagore, Kabir becomes the votary of the universal spirit of mysticism, rising above the sectarian divide and focusing on the human. Tagore also presents Kabir as the embodiment of the deepest stirrings of Indian understanding of the relation between the soul and God. And Tagore, through Evelyn Underhill, the lady who introduced the book, says, and he quotes Kabir saying, Brahma and the creature are ever distinct, yet ever united. Now, I mentioned to you already Ramchandra Shukla's position. Later on, if there is any question, I will elaborate that. Ramchandra Shukla in Hindi Sahitya Ka Itihas, in his book, does not give much importance to Kabir. And he of course talks about Kabir, but within the larger Nirguna tradition, Nirgun Brahm, Nirgun Bhakti tradition in India, and Kabir becomes a sort of a footnote for Ramchandra Shukla in his grand understanding of India's cultural terrain. Hazari Prasad Dwivedi wrote a very important book called Kabir in 1940. And I don't know whether you have heard about Hazari Prasad Dwivedi or Ramchandra Shukla. Hazari Prasad Dwivedi is a very important writer. And if you read Hindi, I suggest to you that you should read this great work. Now, what does Dwivedi, what does he do? He locates Kabir in an inclusive idea of nationalism. Unlike Ramchandra Shukla, who locates Indian nationalism in the deep Sagun and Nirgun tradition, Dwivedi locates nationalism in an inclusive idea of India. So, in the context of the rising demand for partition of India in the period that he was writing in 1940, Dwivedi wanted to shift attention from religious belonging to the complex and differentiated cultural unity that India encompassed. He charted the spatial spread of Kabir among the Julhas or the weavers across northern India. A large number of them Muslims and the rest Hindus. Again, this weaving community is very interesting. Even today, if you are talking about Ansaris among Muslims, who are generally weavers, they are Muslim weavers, among whom Kabir is highly held by people, and the Hindu Julahas also hold Kabir in very high respect. And Hazari Prasad Dwivedi takes it up and begins to argue that Kabir speaks to both the communities, but much more communities which are working communities, the masses. This is one of his big argument. And then he says that although Kabir may have referred to Islam, he argues Kabir's Islam was mediated through, was routed through the pathways of Tantra, Nath Sampradaya, and the yogic traditions. And all of you know that Nath Sampradaya and Tantra were deeply shaped by taking recourse to elements of Buddhism that distanced themselves from Brahmanism, and some of them even denouncing Brahminical practices. So Dwivedi, now what does he argue? He argues that Kabir is the representative of the cultural unity of India, and someone who actually connects the deep cultural traditions in India, which actually engage with very different kinds of complexity than what Ramchandra Shukla presented. A quick look at something of Ambedkar's position on Kabir. I have discussed a little in my recent book. I didn't tell you about my recent book. I recently published a book called Ambedkar's Political Philosophy, and I discuss Ambedkar's Kabir at length. I don't want to tell you a great deal about Ambedkar's relationship with Kabir, but a couple of things before I proceed, because I think I have taken a little longer time. Now, Kabir, Ambedkar doesn't much discuss Kabir. Kabir is part of Ambedkar's background because Ramji Sakpal was Kabir Panthi, and Kabir Panth was practiced for 3 generations or 4 generations in Ambedkar's mother's family. For 4 generations, they were Kabir Panthis. And there is something interesting because Ambedkar comes from a family that was active in the colonial army, East India Company's army. And in the army, they used to keep priests. And there were Ramanandi priests and there were Kabir Panthi priests. So they were exposed to this rivalry between Ramanandis and Kabir Panthis. There was a lot of rivalry between them. And eventually, Ramji Sakbal embraces a Kabir who is distanced from Ramanandis. And it is important for us to know. So what is the Kabir? Ambedkar's writings across, in all his writings, Kabir comes up only in 3 places. And Ambedkar mentions Kabir only in 3 places. But then he says that Kabir is one of his gurus, the other 2 being the Buddha and Jyotiba Phule, Mahatma Phule. So when he calls Kabir as his guru, That means um, something deep in Ambedkar, which he takes from Kabir. And in my book, I have suggested that the thing that Ambedkar takes from Kabir is the idea of the common human and human dignity, human equality and brotherhood, rejection of caste and sectarian divide, and a spiritual journey in which the divine remains undefined, while at the same time exuding its magnetic force and need to forge a bridge across social and religious affiliations. So Ambedkar probably saw Kabir as the voice that spoke to social diversity in India. Kabir was an iconoclast and therefore mocked at authoritarianism of all kinds. And Kabir threw scorn at religious bigotry and pompousness while drawing attention to inwardness and reflectivity. Kabir also dared to break all social codes and proclaimed his message in the face of all scorn leveled against him. Ambedkar himself thought that he is an iconoclast, and he found Kabir mirroring him, because Kabir, no matter how much opposition he faced, he stood up against that opposition. And in Ambedkar, we also find a distinct line of thought through the Buddha, Kabir, and Jyotiba Phule. Okay, now, if you have seen my presentation, what are my reasons to you to suggest that you could be the guru for modern India or post-colonial India? I am giving you 5 reasons very quickly. Most of them will be understood by you. If need be, I will explore them later. First, my reason. The concept of insaniyat. I hope you have heard this. Insaniyat, if you see the Hindi movies, is the most frequent word that you hear. The concept of insaniyat, manuski is generally used in Marathi, and in Kannada we use manaviyate, are quite central to Kabir. All human beings are entitled to a unique dignity which demands deference. Social, political, and religious structures that are an affront to such dignity have to be combated at any cost. This is one message that we get from Kabir. And that could be a platform for us to think about post-colonial India, upholding Manushki or Manaviyate. The second thing, see, Kabir earned his living by being a weaver. He earned his living, and he was a married man. And Kabir is a saint, but who knows the problems of the world and engages with the world. So there is an affirmation of the world. And Kabir argues that it is love, which is the bond that unites people and makes the world to go. And behind this bond of love, he argues, is the presence of Brahma or Isha or anyone that you want to call. My third, this affirmation of the world is quite important for us, particularly because then only we would be able to say that human beings, no matter how low they have as much dignity as anyone else. My third reason why I think he can be a guru, it is possible, Kabir argues, that it is possible for human beings to live together in spite of all their differences by begetting a common ground and reasonably arguing for that common ground. And my fourth reason is, and this is in Kabir, we should not try to fix God, arrest God, but at the same time need to constantly seek Him. In this search, the Guru becomes important. And my fifth reason is the people are bullied and befooled by all powers that be political, social, and religious. But Kabir argues that, it looks as if these people, great people in politics, in society, and in religion, they might consider themselves as the most important, but actually, it is the common person who is the most important element. And therefore, in Kabir, mass culture is important. And this holds for us teachers a great lesson. I think it is important for us to listen to the voices of people in a much bigger way than, listen even to books, and I'll read to you a couple of passages from Kabir later, and you would know this. And Kabir has a certain disdain towards political power. He when people begin to threaten him, take him to Sikandar Lodi in chain. Sikandar Lodi was a scholar and eventually forgives him. But Kabir thinks that great political power need not necessarily be celebrated. And therefore, he displays a certain disdain towards political power. I have shot off my time, but let me just read for you 2 short poems and then ask my question to you. That's why these 6 reasons make me to suggest that Kabir could be one or probably the most important guru for modern India. Let me read from Tagore's collection, and this is the big book, volume 1 of Kabir's poems, Tagore's 100 poems of Kabir. And the poem starts like this. O servant, where dost thou seek me? Lo, I am besides thee. I am neither in temple nor in mosque. I am neither in Kaaba nor in Kailash. Neither am I in rites and ceremonies, nor in yoga and renunciation. If thou art a true seeker, thou shalt at once see me, thou shalt meet me in a moment of time. Thou shalt meet me in a moment of time. Kabir says, O sadhu, God is the breath of all breath. God is the breath of all breath. And let me read for you from Tagore's 69th poem. If God be within the mosque, then to whom does this world belong? Then to whom does this world belong? If Ram be within the image which you find upon your pilgrimage, then who is there to know what happens without? Hari is in the east, Allah is in the west. Look within your heart, for there you will find both Karim and Ram. All the men and women of the world are his living forms. Kabir is the child of Allah and of Ram. He is my Guru, he is my Peer. And I wind up by asking you two questions. Do you see anyone akin to Kabir in the language that you know? And I thought that some of you may not be Kannada speaking, and therefore I asked this. I initially said, do you see anyone akin to Kabir in Kannada? And two, my second question to you is, and remember, these questions are not exhaustive. You can ask any question or comment on anything that I have spoken so far. Do you think in an approach such as that of Kabir, do you think an approach such as that of Kabir could be reconciled with our idea of strong state? Because there are many people who argue that a strong state is required. And I personally believe that it is important to have, particularly in India, a strong state. But can you be reconciled Kabir, who talks about very different ways of keeping people together? Can it be reconciled with a strong state and his disdain towards power? Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. We still have about 15 to 18 minutes. Any comments? I hope you have heard about Kabir and I was not throwing something which, yeah. Yeah, Mujakshi, you have a question?
No, sir, but one the doubt ಇದೆ. Can I ask in Kannada, sir?
ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲಿ ಕೇಳಿ ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ
ಕಬೀರ್ ಮತ್ತೆ ಆಧ್ಯಾತ್ಮಿಕತೆ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನೀವು ಏನ್ ಹೇಳ್ತೀರಾ ಸರ್ ಅಷ್ಟೇ?
ಅವರ ಆಧ್ಯಾತ್ಮಿಕತೆ ಬಗ್ಗೆ
ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಅವರ ದೋಹಾಗಳು ತತ್ವಗಳು ನಾ ನೋಡಿದಾಗ ಆಧ್ಯಾತ್ಮಿಕತೆಗೆ ದೂರ ಆಗಿತ್ತಲ್ವಾ?
Yeah. Can I, Jakshi, can I say in English? I'll tell you in English. Yeah, because
no problem, sir. Yeah, I can understand English.
Yeah. See, Kabir is a saint. Kabir is a little background. Let me give you. Kabir is I don't know whether you have been to Varanasi or Kashi, and traditionally Kashi used to be the meeting place of great scholars. Even today, when you go to the Ganga Tat, you can feel the pulse of devotion around that place. I don't know whether any one of you have been to the great Vishwanath temple, one of the oldest temple in India, the basic of the foundation of the great religious temper of India, disposition of India. I have been there several times to the Vishwanath temple. I don't like some of the changes that have taken place to the access to the Vishwanath temple in recent years. But still, I keep going to Benares very often because it is still a place of outpouring of great spiritual energy. Now, coming back directly to your question, Kabir probably cannot be placed within the Advaitin tradition, within the tradition of Advaita, because the central principle of Advaita tradition is Tattvamasi, Aham Brahmasmi. So it is eventually if you follow Shankara and his Vyakya in this regard, eventually this realization is a self-realization that you are the same as the principle. Kabir distances himself from that position, like Ramanuja does, but very different from the Madhva tradition. In the Ramanuja tradition, the concept of prapatti, that is surrender to the Almighty, to God, becomes the central disposition of the devotee. And therefore, Atma and Paramatma, they are distinct realities, but bonded together. And this bond is an expression of love. And eventually, the Ramanuja tradition led to a lot of outpouring of a devotion of a particular kind. And by and large, you can say that Kabir belongs to that tradition, because Kabir argues for the distinction between the Atma and Paramatma. However, he says, like the Advaitin would say, that the whole universe is filled with the presence of the divine. So you don't need to carve out a particular space to locate the divine. If you open your eyes, you can see the divine manifest all over the world. And this presence of the divine, Kabir argues, it manifests in terms of what Kabir says love, but we can say deep bonds across human beings. And human beings cannot survive without those deep bonds. Now look at this. Kabir cannot be fully located within the Vishishtadvaita tradition, but has a distinct mark which he takes from the Advaitin tradition, or for that matter, from the Sufi learning, because the Sufis celebrated the presence of God across the world in small gestures, in small ways, and very often used very local, very pithy, very folkish kind of idioms to express it. And if you think of a spiritual journey of Kabir, you need to locate him there. And the third thing, Ambujakshi, I wanted to just mention, For Kabir and for mm, several people, including the Bhakti tradition in India. And if you have read someone like Allama Prabhu or Basava, you would notice this. They argue that don't fix God. If you fix God, you are the human being who fixes God and thereby make God of your size. God has to be searched for. It is a journey that you have to do. And the guru becomes so important in this particular journey. Now they, and Kabir belongs to that tradition which says that fixing God makes God human and takes away from God the very definitive thing of being the ultimate or supreme principle. Therefore, Kabir, I feel, is one of the person who deeply embodies the complex traditions of religiosity in India. A very different kind of religiosity than you and me probably practice, but very different kind of an idea of religion. Anyway, yeah.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, Vijaya. Is it Vijaya? Yeah. What happened? Hello? Oh, some of you are putting questions here. Okay, let me see the chat box. Yeah. Qazi Abu Javed. Thank you so much, sir, for your valuable lecture. Okay.
Thank you, sir. Thank
Yeah.
you very much.
Yeah. Yeah. Javed, what did you like in the presentation?
Sir, actually, you told about the Kabir and the Khiti Mohan Sen, you earlier in the lecture, which is the father of Dr. Amartya Sen in Santiniketan, which speech I like, which view.
Yeah. I asked you that question, and I'll just have 2 or 3 minutes before I wind up. I asked you those particular questions. 2 questions. Do you find any parallels between somebody, some traditions in Karnataka and, or for that matter, Tamil Nadu, where bhakti flourished in a very big way? Those of you who have read Vachana Sahitya, particularly Basaveshwara and Allama Prabhu, who are much older to Kabir, because it is a 12th century tradition. You will find a great deal of parallels between their sense of devotion and bhakti and the way Kabir looks at the world. There has been a little problem about the way Vachana Sahitya has been interpreted over the years. Sometimes it actually begins to take overt stances with regard to spiritualism, and begin to argue that they all taught us to attain Kailas or attain our unity with Linga. However, there could be alternative interpretations, and as students of politics, it is very important for us to do this. I am not able to recite vachanas, but let me recall here in this context one of the vachanas of Akka Mahadevi. And when you read Akka Mahadevi, she is so conscious about her own body and her own looks. And Allama Prabhu, who was presiding over the Anubhava Mantapa, sometimes used to tease Mahadevi, Akka Mahadevi, saying that, look here, you are so conscious about your looks that unless you give up that ahankar, that egoism, it would be very difficult for you to make spiritual progress. But Akka Mahadevi did not stop. And let me recite to you, not recite, but say one of the vachanas of Akka Mahadevi. And there are much more sensuous vachanas, which I don't want to recite, partly because I think all of you might be very straitened university teachers who don't want to listen to very sensuous poetry, etc. In one of the vachanas, Akka Mahadevi says, if someone comes with long hair and with popping breasts, you immediately locate that person as a woman. And if suppose somebody comes with short hair, with deep breasts, then you identify, with mustache and beard, you identify him as man. But you forget, Akka Mahadevi says, that both of them, both man and woman, are the bearers of the same humanity. I'm sure some one of you must have read this vachana. Very interesting. There is a reassertion of the world. It's not that the world is denied. Akka Mahadevi does not say that my looks are not important, but actually begins to turn herself as her focus somewhere else. Quite interesting. This affirmation of the world is something which is very interesting in large number of bhakti poets, which may not be the case with Mirabai. The Mirabai I have read. There could be new interpretations coming up. But in Vachana Sahitya, for instance, I find a great deal of assertion of the world about the dignity of human beings. Otherwise, Basava could not have, who is this fellow? Adapaya, no? Adapaya, yeah. He would, he makes chappals for Basaveshwara from the skin of his thighs, and Basava takes the Basaveshwara takes the chappals and keeps them on his head. Now, this is something sacrilegious to anyone, untouchable doing this, and the untouchable, the chappals made by the person are taken by Basaveshwara and put on his head. This kind of radical equality of human beings, that all human beings are worth the same, and therefore their worth has to be recognized, is something which is quite central to the Bhakti tradition in India. And I find that in the Vachana Sahitya, but I also find it in Kabir in a very big way.